Coming up on today's show, I want to look at some updated draft targets for Atlanta after the first week of NFL free agency, because once you signed Kirk Cousins to that big contract, I would think you probably don't go quarterback at number 8 or look to trade up for a quarterback, and you try and use that 8th overall pick to best maximize Atlanta's roster for the next few seasons while Cousins is under contract. So let's just refresh everyone's memory super quickly on the moves Atlanta has made so far in free agency, adding big names like Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney, filling out your roster with a backup tight end and offensive tackle, bringing back a Daryl Hodge on special teams, Ray McLeod, trading for wide receiver Rondale Moore with Desmond Ridder. So the Falcons have made a couple of additions so far. So now I kind of want to look to the next stage of the offseason, the draft. Now, before we do, reminder to go ahead and join the channel today because the NFL Draft is a little over a month away. So if you are looking for mock drafts, draft rumors, free daily content, and the largest Atlanta Falcons YouTube channel out there besides the Atlanta Falcons YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe today. Now, let's talk about what the Falcons need following the first big wave of free agency. I still think edge is a huge need for them. They did not address that in free agency thus far. I'm going to include wide receiver, but I just want it to be known there is a huge gap between edge and everything else. So the focus should be on pass rusher, but they may decide to bring back a Calais Campbell, a Bud Dupree, or something like that, and maybe soften the need for edge in the draft. But without further ado, let's talk about these needs. Starting with edge rusher, I think there are 3 options in play for the 8th overall pick in the draft. Alabama's Dallas Turner, Florida State's Jared Verse, and UCLA's Latu. So let's break down these 3 prospects for a moment. Dallas Turner comes in as the big cheese, if you will, right? An extremely freaky, athletic guy who was very productive last season for the Crimson Tide. 15.5 tackles for loss, 10 sacks. Whereas Jared Verse has an awesome story starting off at Albany, then transferring down to Tallahassee, put together back-to-back 9-sack seasons. And then you've got Latu, who's also got an equally really cool and inspiring story. But first, let's do a deeper dive on Dallas Turner. He's 6'3", 247 pounds. At the NFL Combine, he finished first in the 40-yard dash and first in the 10-yard split. Usually, you can find a couple of awesome athletic traits. Kind of reminds me of the player out of Texas Tech last year, Tyree Wilson. But the production wasn't there for the Red Raiders, right? That's not the case for Dallas Turner, and that's why I think he's going to be the first defensive end outside linebacker off the board. He's got the athletic traits. He's the fastest guy of the bunch. He's the quickest of all of them, maybe even the strongest, and he has the production to go with it. So he really checks both boxes you look for when you are selecting in the top 10. Now, Jared Verse out of Florida State, really awesome story. Started off at Albany, then transferred to Florida State, and instead of being a backup or special teamer, he rose the ranks, and he was their number 1 pass rusher, putting together back-to-back 9-sack seasons. He's 6'4", 254 pounds. Now, was he as fast as Dallas Turner? No, but I don't want people to fall into the trap of, oh, Jared Verse, he wasn't as fast as Dallas Turner. That means he's not fast. Guys, he ran a 4.58 40-yard dash. That is faster than wide receivers run sometimes. So he still has great legs to get him to the quarterback. Sure, he may not be the fastest, but how often is the fastest at every single position the best guy, right? You play football with pads on, not in your underwear in Indianapolis. So don't be concerned because Jared Verse wasn't as fast as Dallas Turner. He is still dominant. He's probably the strongest of all 3. His bull rush is just teach tape. Now, my only concern for Verse is when you have to win on power in college, oh boy, you may run into some trouble when you go up against NFL offensive tackles and no longer Wake Forest offensive tackles. There's a big jump between the two. So I don't want to see Jared Verse be a guy that just wins on power, which you can do in the ACC, but not in the NFC South. Third and final edge rusher, the UCLA man, Latu, the best player out of the Pac-12 defensively, we'll say, from this past season. He's 6'5", 259 pounds, the slowest of the bunch, 4.64, 40-yard dash. He's a well-rounded player. What I like about him and Jared Verse a lot is they don't take snaps off on defense. And if you really start to think about the direction the NFL is headed, what kind of formations are we seeing? What kind of schemes are we seeing from a lot of defenses? We're seeing a lot of nickel looks, right? You're seeing a lot of teams go with an extra DB on the field and one less linebacker. So if you've only got 4 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers, well, all of a sudden you need those 4 linebackers to bring a little bit extra oomph to the run stopping and not just wait for the obvious passing situations and turn it up then. They have got to be able to stop the run as well. And so I think of all these 3 players, Dallas Turner would be the best pick for Atlanta. But what I do like about Verse and Latu is they are able to bring some excellent run-stopping abilities to their game. The concern with Latu, I should mention, would be at Washington, he was deemed like you should medically retire due to a neck injury. Then he transfers down to UCLA, and he's able to continue playing football. So teams will definitely have some level of concern over that neck injury. But I really like Dallas Turner the most of all 3, but I could be sold on Jared Verse at second. But could you imagine offseason where Atlanta goes, all right, we need help at quarterback, wide receiver, and edge. And what do? They go get the number 1 quarterback in free agency. They go get a serviceable wide receiver in Darnell Mooney. And they go get the number 1 edge rusher in Dallas Turner. That would be one hell of a offseason for the Falcons to make dramatic improvements at all 3 positions of need. So let me toss this question your way. Will the Falcons make the playoffs? Yes or no? We were debating this in the office earlier, and I figured, who should I ask best than Falcons Today audience? So let me know down below in the comment section. Now, I know I went relatively chalk there of my preference order being in the order of most NFL draft gurus of Turner versus Latu, but I do think it's worth sharing that historically, NFL draft experts, if you will, the pre-draft rankings we all see and memorize, they tend to be inaccurate at some positions, but they are accurate at some, like edge rusher. Where what I want to share with you here is all the edge rushers that were taken number 1 through number 10 from 2016 to 2020. I feel like that's a good size sample size and far enough back where we can deem whether or not it was a good or bad pick. And you can see that, sure, Captain Obvious here, if you pick earlier, you're going to get a better player. But I don't think that's as guaranteed for some positions like it is for edge rusher, right? Wide receiver, there are years where there are better receivers taken in round 2 than round 1. Go ask Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown all about that. But at edge rusher, you guys notice a trend here? Like, they tend, and when I say they, I mean like the Mel Kipers of the world and the GMs, like, when they figure out who the number 1 edge rusher is, more often than not, they are pretty spot on with it, okay? So compare the guys that went 1 through 10 in that span to players that went 11 through 32 in the same time span. There are still some good players here. I'm not saying you can't find a good edge rusher outside the top 10. Brian Burns, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, like those are some solid players right there. But you also have some bigger misses, like LJ Collier. Fast forward to 2017 or rewind, Charles Harris, Taco Charlton, Shaq Lawson. I never even heard of Darren Lee. Like, there are some really bad picks when you get outside the top 10. And I think the total sacks for those 2 eras, top 10 versus 11 through 32, they really speak for themselves. So, yes, a part of me is being really obvious here and vanilla that, well, if you go earlier, you should be better. And that's not always the case. Like, I think you can make an argument in 2018, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, not the first 2 quarterbacks taken, were the best quarterbacks taken of that draft, right? But we saw 3 guys go before them. So edge rusher tends to be a position that it's not as fluid, we'll say, as maybe like quarterback and wide receiver and offensive tackle, for example. All right, let's switch gears here. Let's talk about some wide receivers. Guys I expect to go in round 1. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, Odunze, Brian Thomas, and Xavier Worthy. Now, I don't expect Marvin Harrison to fall to 8, so just kind of cross him off your wish list for a moment. But Nabers, Odunze, Thomas, and Xavier Worthy, they could very much be in play at number 8. 2 guys really catch my attention, though, and we've talked about them for a few months now, but I just want to go back to it. It's Odunze and Malik Nabers. I think if all three of these wide receivers went in different drafts, there's a very real chance all three could have been the first wide receiver taken. That's how good Harrison, Odunze, and Nabers are. So let's kind of get to know Rome Odunze a little bit better. He's 6'3", 217 pounds. So he's got a big frame, right? And you'd expect maybe the bigger frame guys just to be red zone targets and not have really good speed. But that's not Rome Odunze. He's got the size and he's got the speed as well, which makes him one of the most athletic freaks at this position. And I'll toss in the best catch radius we have seen in a couple of drafts. Meaning, if you just throw it in his vicinity, he's going to come down with the football. There are a lot of really talented college wide receivers that are super fast, maybe really tall, but they need the ball thrown to them in a perfect spot. And in the NFL, the game moves so much faster, and your quarterbacks are better, but so are the defenders. And it may not always be a picturesque perfect pass, right? And sometimes you get guys like Rome Odunze who can make Odell Beckham Jr. caliber catches. You know what I mean? That's the level I think Rome Odunze is on, and that's why he's my favorite after Marvin Harrison. Now, I like Malik Nabers a ton as well. He is a playmaker. He is a vertical threat. He is a yak monster. 6 foot, 200 pounds. He is fast and very fast. I just cannot get that across enough. He is a speed demon. He is your stereotypical take the top off the defense kind of wide receiver. And if Odunze were to go before Malik Nabers, I'd be very okay with Malik Nabers being the pick at number 8. My preference, though, would be Rome Odunze. I think this would be a great selection for Atlanta based off best player available. I like Rome Odunze and honestly probably Malik Nabers more than Dallas Turner. Does Atlanta need a wide receiver more than an edge rusher? No, they do not. And if they want to finally find a long-term solution at edge rusher, Dallas Turner at 8 would be a very good pick. But something in my gut just tells me Odunze and Nabers, they may be very special wide receivers. Okay, we're going to talk about the next position of need in just a moment. But really quickly, I want to tell you guys that the Kirk Cousins Falcons jerseys are on Fanatics right now. Now, we don't know exactly what number Kirk Cousins will wear, but once that number selection is made, you can pre-order the jersey today, and they will ship the jersey out to you once the number has been selected. So if you want to rock a Kirk Cousins jersey, go to chatsports.com/Cousins. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. So up your Falcons wardrobe and get yourself a brand new jersey today. Let's talk about some cornerbacks now. I don't think there are any good safeties in this year's draft. Not one that's going to go round 1. So cross that off your round 1 wish list. But cornerback, well, there's always going to be some good cornerbacks, right? Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, and Cooper DeJean. You can look at their stats from last season, and Terrion Arnold, I would say, had the best year of all of them. 5 interceptions in 2023, 6 in his entire Alabama career, 12 pass breakups, 63 tackles to go along with it. But let's get to know each one of them a little bit more individually. Cooper DeJean is 6 foot, 203 pounds, 7 career interceptions, and an excellent run stopper. He's a very well-rounded cornerback. He's also a playmaker, right? He had a punt return for a touchdown that was erroneously wiped off the field against, I think it was Minnesota. He always has a knack for finding himself near the football. He's just one of those ball players that maybe not the best height, weight, speed combination we've seen coming out of the draft, but sometimes you have football players that ignore their physical limitations and their instincts and their awareness always put them in a spot to be successful. That's Cooper DeJean. Nate Wiggins, 6'1", 173 pounds. So on the slender side compared to these other 2 cornerbacks. But when I think about Nate Wiggins and when I watch his tape, 2 words just keep popping into my head. Long and fast, right? And those are traits that GMs, whether or not the production is there, they'll take a flyer on, right? They may look at that and go, you don't get that tall and that wingspan and that level of speed in a corner every single year in the draft. And if we feel that we have a good coach at our DB room that can put a guy like Nate Wiggins after a season or 2 into a starting successful role in the NFL, they may fall in love with the Wiggins. But I don't think at pick number 8, this is a wise selection for Atlanta. I could see Nate Wiggins maybe going closer to like 20 to 25-ish, where a team doesn't have as huge of a need to satisfy in the first round of the draft, so they can afford to let Wiggins develop for a year or two. As for Terrion Arnold, 6 foot, 189 pounds. He's got loads of experience against the best conference, in the best conference of football in the SEC. 6 career interceptions. The guy's a shutdown corner. I don't know how else to put this. Like, Terrion Arnold at the core is a blanket cornerback that you're just not going to look his direction. And if you do, you're likely going to pay a price for it, as 5 times he was able to record an interception last season. So Terrion Arnold would be my pick of all 3 of these corners. I know that cornerback is not the most pressing need on this team, but if they don't see a long-term with A.J. Terrell, they may decide this is not a bad time to go out and pick Terrion Arnold, right? To use that selection to maybe set us up for success in the future at this position. So for me, I think Terrion Arnold would be a very safe pick. It may not be the most pressing need at the moment, but I think in a few years, no one would be upset about a selection of Terrion Arnold when he's made a Pro Bowl by then. So who will be the Falcons pick at number 8? Shoot your shot down below in the comment section. Which guy you think Atlanta will ultimately select, not to who you want, but who you believe Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot will collaborate on and pick with that 8th overall selection. All right, boys and girls, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, all that good stuff for the YouTube algorithm.